SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Barcelona, the industry-leading conference bringing you the future of sports betting and iGaming.
SBC Summit Barcelona is where you can experience the entire global industry coverage under one roof. Join 10,000 industry professionals for 3 days of game-changing conversation and education. Get your tickets now at sbcevents.com.
With a greater choice in products circulating the iGaming space, developers have now been tasked in providing a more immersive experience to enable them to keep players engaged. At the recent CasinoBeats Summit in Malta, SBC's Managing Director Andrew McCarron took to the stage to moderate a panel discussion titled, "It's Not Just a Game, Delivering Immersive Experiences." The session explored how user experience alongside game design can be utilised to provide better interactivity and sensory engagement. Joining Andy on stage was Chris McGowan, the head of gaming at Scatters, Matthias Ciappara, the CCO at CompetitionLabs, Jason Attard, the head of UX and design at GameLounge, and Kristjan Farrugia, the CPO at WKND, who ventured down various strands of conversation, including uses of certain tools, such as dynamic game controls and interfaces, education in the immersive experience, and adapting to user intents. This is what they had to say.
This is a talk about immersive experiences. So that QR code will help you all immerse yourselves into the discussion. So, don't be shy. At the end of the discussion, we'll throw some questions up and see what the panelists can inform you on. I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself and just explain where you're from. You like to go first, Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm currently the head of gaming for Scatters Group. I've been in the gaming industry now for over 20 years, and my educational background actually comes from a psychological perspective. I'm quite interested in looking into the human behavior and reasons why people do what they do, pretty much.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason. I'm the head of UX and design for GameLounge. Been in the gaming industry now for the past 6 years. Have around 20 years experience in design and UX, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Matthias Ciappara. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of CompetitionLabs. I specialize mostly in gamification and player engagement, and I have previously worked at Entain as Director of Gaming Innovation on leading the gamification department across the group.
Hi everyone, Farrugia Chris. I'm Chief Product Officer at Weekend. I've been in the gaming industry for the past 10 years. I have a technical background and shifted my career into product, focusing on UX and player journeys.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously, we're talking about immersive experiences. It's bringing in new features. How important is it to bring the player along with you when you introduce new elements to make things more immersive? Can the education be part of the immersive experience? I don't know if you want to go first, Kristjan.
Sure. From a product perspective, the first question is it depends. There are two schools of it. First of all, education is important, but we also have to understand, if you have to educate the player a lot, will they be engaged? Will they go through the education process with you? So you need to make that also an immersive experience where they can onboard very easily. It's more like having an easy onboarding session for what they want to do. It's also, I think, important to understand what the player wants and whether the user experience is aligned with what they really want to do as well. So that's, I think, my perspective on that.
So I'm a big advocate of don't make me think. So if we are creating a feature and I can't explain it in clear terms to my mother, it's probably too complicated. When I'm also trying to introduce a new feature, we also have to understand the appetite of the player of, do they actually want to learn about this new feature? Because it's kind of annoying if the player may not want to learn about this new thing and just wants to play. So it's firstly understanding, does the player have appetite to learn about this? And then it's how to be able to start educating the player on it. And it's about timing. We can't consume that much information at one go. So if you try to explain to me and give me a 3-page document on how this feature works, especially if I'm on mobile and I have so many notifications firing, I'm probably going to get bored. So it's about making sure you're not giving out too much information in one go where the player feels fatigued, and kind of drip feeding the information that how does the player have to learn, what do I have to do to be able to get what kind of value you're providing from the feature.
I can't agree more with that. I feel when it comes to learning for users, first of all, you're going to have different levels of users, right? You're going to have beginners to pro players, and obviously you don't want to annoy pro players with contextual menus and all that. However, the beginning players would need definitely progressive engagement when it comes to information. Like even when they jump in a slot, what's the point of just showing them the gaming panel immediately rather than just skip it? So in order to improve that, I would suggest that, perhaps we could start introducing a bit of machine learning in there, and start understanding what the players actually want. So if they close it too many times, you don't serve it throughout the rest of the game, so throughout the rest of their experience through the platform, basically.
Well, pretty much what else is there to say? I completely agree with my colleagues over here who a player learning it's important that they understand what they're doing. You don't want the game that is way overcomplicated that they don't have a clue where to start from. I mean, we've seen some games now coming out where before you actually play the game, you first have to see a demo on how to actually play the game. I mean, the players come in there have a relaxing time, a good time. They're not there to pretty much come to school, right? Which is extremely important. So pretty much if you can't shout it to a passing car and they understand it through the car window at that moment in time, it's already way overcomplicated.
I mean, Jason, you told us before about an interface to introduce bonuses on, is it mystery gates? You just want to explain how they used UX on that for the Asian audience?
Yeah, so what we did, for example, is at the time, rather than just serving a bonus immediately to the users, those users usually would want to stay engaged and kind of go through the narrative of the story. So what we initially did was we created this character and the fictional story behind it. And basically we kind of gave them the idea that they're in control of what they're gaining when it comes to the bonus and how they're getting through it. In fact, I remember this was the spirit of the forest, basically, and she came through and she gave you a set of keys that you would choose from, right? And then you would access the door and the bonus would be served to you. However, in reality, there was always, the option of closing the panel and, moving to the next step. For this audience, practically, it was more successful going through the whole journey because they felt part of the game. Then with the game itself, they felt more engaged and so forth, right? So I guess it all depends on the market and the localization mostly.
Obviously, mobile's a key platform for most our gamers, our customers. But there always seems to be a competition to sort of squeeze as much as we can on such small real estate to make it feel like a desktop game. I mean, are we going about that the wrong way? Is mobile too complicated, Chris?
As you correctly said, the majority of users are coming through a mobile. However, we do still see some geos where there is heavy desktop usage. But in saying that, whether it's desktop or mobile, it's irrelevant. With all the extra gamification that we're getting in place now, and especially when you take a look at crypto and some of the balances, the integers, especially if you're using BTC, is so long, we're taking up way too much real estate and making it way too complicated for players to understand. And this should be, as soon as you see the screen, you should completely understand, what am I supposed to do as a player? I'm not here to work this out. I mean, I need to spin there, and this is how much I'm betting, and this is how much I'm getting back in return.
How about you?
So I think when we're looking at a mobile device, we have a few limitations that we have to deal with. And I don't think we should look at mobile and desktop in the same view. Because when we're playing on mobile, we have generally a very small screen size, and my eyes can only consume so much information before I get anxiety. If you pack too many things in one go, I either don't understand what's happening, or I get anxiety because I'm not sure what I have to do. And complicated it depends on if this is the feature complicated or is it the way it's presented complicated. If I look at game shows, for example, Crazy Time has 5 different bonus features, but on mobile, I'm only focusing at one at an individual point in time. But then when I go on a slot which has 6 or 7 reels, I have absolutely no idea what's happening. And if that player then starts losing money and is not understanding what's happening, the player is never going to come back. Because I just now lost money and I have no clue what's happening there.
Yeah, interesting thing, right? In psychology, we know we've got the magic number 7, 7 plus minus 2. Some people can focus around about 9 things, others can focus on about 5 things, but it's 7 plus minus 2 in take. So reels that are more than that become extremely complicated, as you mentioned. Now, one thing that's quite interesting is a group of researchers led by Merge found that when they're in the zone, when they're concentrating on the game and they lose pretty much everything going on around them, eye tracking software has found that the only thing they are focusing on at the time, or 90% of the time, give or take, is the actual in-game balance. So when we have too many features that are actually distracting from this, it's harder for the player to actually maintain within the zone of their game session. So while, yes, certain things and certain animations are nice, it comes down to, do you really want to captivate their attention or not?
Kristjan, you're nodding away there.
Yeah, no, very true. I think there's also like a rise of crash games. We also saw it coming in, where it's a very much simplified experience for the players, right? Which I think goes hand in hand with the mobile experience, where you have like limited real estate and you're just focusing on one very simple task, essentially.
Jason, what's your view on mobile and how immersive?
I think the device, basically, we shouldn't, when we design user interfaces, especially on such devices, we need to literally forget about the device completely. We just need to see what elements bring value to the user at that point in time and address, obviously, the UI accordingly based on that. So if at this point in time, this user needs to see, the winnings and basically what's happening in the game, you hide everything from there. And obviously create a contextual menu that would come up and bring up the other options. But I think simple is key here, definitely.
Kristjan, I'm going to come to you now as a CPO. Should UX teams have an earlier involvement when it comes to creating a new gambling product rather than it being more product-led as it is at the moment?
100%. Nowadays, like even internally for us, we start from the user journey, from the UX. Where else would you start? Like, yes, obviously there's the value, company value and ROI, but you need to have a full vision of how the player will experience your product. And that will lead, everything will go on from there, right? So technology needs to support that UX, business model needs to support that, but ultimately we're here to entertain people. So the experience is key. And that's where we would start.
Matthias, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, definitely. Same here. I completely agree. I mean, I can design the most amazing mechanic ever, right? But if it can't be presented to a player in an understandable fashion, the feature won't work anyway. So bringing the UX team as fast as possible, and even in just ideation and creation phase, makes kind of less back and forth when you're now 4 months down the line and then you start realizing that the feature isn't going to work because the UX will not work. So it's about trying to get as many people as possible in the room when you're trying to do ideas that can bring different perspectives and different ideologies as much as possible to create a more cohesive product at the end of the day.
And Jason?
It's more about the product as well. I would say when it comes to UX, definitely you need to design products with you being user centric, and obviously having the user journey in mind completely, because in the end, the goal will be achieved faster when it comes to revenue and all that when it comes to the product. Then you have other situations when, for example, you're focusing on an affiliate product and you're focusing on SEO. And obviously, the SEO and the ranking and all that takes predominance on that because obviously the user come and go in a millisecond basically on site. They just convert and they're out. So, it depends on the product, but obviously having the user research on the personas and definitely user interviews. I think even if it happens after, you interview the users that actually are using your product and basically understand better what they're doing will definitely help in the altering of the product and further to success and down the line, basically.
I pretty much agree with all of you guys. I would take it a step further though as well. I do know some game providers out there they do involve the UX with different casinos and operators and seeing their perspective on it. I also know with all these years in the industry, I've also seen way too many decisions being taken over a beer in the bar. I mean, when you're speaking to someone, what game are you playing? I'm playing this particular game because fantastic. All right, great. We now instantly need to stop everything we're doing and incorporate that. It doesn't quite work that way. You need to base things on data. So I would say, yes, you need to involve them earlier, but also involve operators. And at the same time, create some focus group with some players, understand exactly what's going on and why it's actually happening and why it's working.
I mean, Jason, you just touched on using different player profiles, and one of the things we talked about is should games be able to dynamically adapt to what the user intent is when they come and play. Everybody plays for different reasons. Sometimes some people play for different reasons in the same day. A game's flexible enough to be able to adapt to that user intent.
I think personalization is key when it comes to the user interface. So, once a user comes in today, if you look at apps, for example, right, you install an app, they ask you a few questions at the beginning, most of them, right, in order to design basically that game and accommodate your needs. So, for example, if you're playing, I don't know, one of these slot games, basically, where you need to win certain chests or stuff like that. Basically, you would come to a point where that's what you want, right? Now, when it comes to personalization, I feel that this can also be achieved in the UI itself. So, for example, if we take, I don't know, Binance, for example, right? They have two UIs, basically, one for the beginners of crypto and one, for advanced. So, and most of them clearly prefer, the simplistic approach rather than seeing all the data and all that stuff, just because potentially they don't know what they're doing and they just, look at their investment. So I guess personalizing the UI eventually in slots, and even like when it comes to winning lines, do every user know what those are? For example, do they know why the pirate is waving at them or doing a slot, and so forth? So I guess, yes, accommodating the design according to the user is key for sure.
Chris, do you have a view on that?
No, it is completely key. The only thing is to keep in mind for it not to turn into a self-fulfilling prophecy type thing. Like, I'm pretty sure everyone's used to different TV apps where you start watching one thing or you have an interest in one particular thing for one reason, and all of a sudden it's just showing you a bunch of stuff that you don't actually want. So rather than have it constantly learning, I think there should be a hybrid system where it's giving you what you want in that session, but tomorrow you might change your mind. So while I know where your starting point is, I won't just carry on from where it is.
And Kristjan, you were talking about machine learning.
Yeah, I'm a very big fan of Netflix and their suggestion engine. So it seems that they always have something interesting going on. And I think thanks to also AI, there was also the previous panel for those that followed it. I think it will become more accessible for technology layers to make suggestions for games and make the portfolio more personalized for players, essentially. And I think in the near future, that will become definitely key for any offering.
Makes sense?
So I think from a game supplier perspective, they're never going to have enough data about the player to actually know the player's intent, because they see such a small snippet of information about the player playing on my games. So trying to make the game dynamically change when you're only seeing a very small part of the player's data and life cycle, it's especially when you're trying to make it in a way where it's dynamic to the player's session, right? And it could be that the player has logged in on my games the first time today from this operator, and I have no idea about him. So I think from a game's perspective, it should focus on serving one cohort of customers incredibly well. And then it's the responsibility of the operator to make sure that the customers that are in that cohort get the games that they like. I think it's a responsibility of the operators that make sure that personalization is happening on the operator side, not just focusing on new content and trying to get people to try as many things as possible.
So is that where a game's volatility will come in? Each different player would find a game more immersive depending on their particular predilection for volatility.
Yes, volatility is a massive part of it, right? But even just game teams, what features I like. Also just like, how do I play? It could be some person likes playing on their desktop for 20 minutes. It could be I am playing for 5 minutes on my mobile. So putting a game with a retention mechanic, which requires me to play 150 spins before I hit it, may not be optimal when I'm playing on mobile. So it's about seeing how the different player behaviors are and making sure that we're serving things right for that player. But from a game's perspective, they should be, we're generating how much? 1,400, 1,500 games a year? Most players aren't, a shelf life of a game now is around 3 weeks. So after 3 weeks, it diminishes massively. So we're focusing too much on creating new content, but what about being able to create really high premium content and making sure from an operator perspective, we're serving the right content to the right customer.
Anyone else got a view on volatility and the role it plays in immersion?
Yeah, well, volatility is currently quite a bit of a touchy subject, so to speak, at least from my perspective. One thing with it, I think one important thing with volatility is we don't have a standard, right? We know that RTP is RTP, 96% is 96%. But when it comes to volatility, what is low volatility in one provider might be high on another. I mean, take a look at certain providers, I mean, without mentioning, it's all over the place at the minute. We don't have a standard. And I think the industry really needs a standard when it comes to explaining to the players what the volatility is. At the end of the day, the RTP, yes, gives back to the player, but that's not what generates the bankroll. It's been shown that it is actually the volatility, because if you constantly get small wins, it's going to keep you playing longer. And also, as we know, the study I just finished showed that problematic gamblers are the ones that tend to play on the higher volatility games, not the normal players, so to speak. But when it comes to players making their own volatility, I mean, in the past we had a lot more adjustable pay lines, where if you're paying on more lines, you have more intersections, so more chances of smaller wins. So you can sort of adjust it that particular way. But then if you take a look at now with the dawn of all the crash games, you can cash out at any point in time. So you can actually try and be as volatile as you want. When it comes to actually designing games for players, as you mentioned, yes, game providers should have a certain niche where they focus on, because otherwise everyone's doing the same thing and you could spread yourself too thin. But I do tend to disagree on the game providers not having enough data, because while from the casino perspective, operator's perspective, we know that this player does this across all these games, the game provider has the data from millions of people on billions of rounds. Throw that through any statistical software and it'll give you their p-values and you know exactly what's happening with your games. So it really comes down to analyzing the data and looking for certain things and maybe being a bit creative on how you look at the data.
Anyone else on that view on that? No?
I tend to agree. One thing that's a bit of a challenge, obviously, especially for operators like our partners, how do you place new games? How can you tell if a new game will be a hit or a miss? There are like gazillions of games going on, being released on a monthly basis. How would you know which one is going to be a hit and players will like? And that's a bit like the challenge that we have, like between offering the players what we know that they want versus offering something that we think that they might like. And how do you place all that in the very small real estate that you have to obviously retain your profits and potentially offer a new experience to the players, because they don't know whether they would like something new or not.
I guess that would be a question I would give to Matthias as a supplier. Just how patient are operators when it comes to offering new experiences? What kind of window do you have to present something to the players to let it bed in and build up that following?
So I think from an operator perspective, there's two parts on if they want to release new features and innovation. If they want to do it, which there is a bit of sentiment in the industry, which is that if we've been doing something for 20 years and it's been working, why change it? And the other thing is, can we do it? And can we do it varies quite drastically. If I'm an operator and I operate in 15 different markets with 15 different sets of regulations, my developers are going to spend more time trying to adhere to the regulations than trying to create new features. So creating a new feature becomes incredibly difficult. When it comes to the window of engagement, when we're looking at mobile phones, the example I use when we're looking at mobile versus desktop is that it's like when we went from having a large Mars bar and then now we started going with the mini ones. And it's because they have lower calories, but instead of having one in the evening, I now have 5 of them over the day. So I'm kind of kidding myself. So it's the same thing with mobile. We are no longer doing a session of 25 minutes in the evening. I am now breaking it down because I am in the toilet and I want to play 5 minutes. And that's sort of, so our session times now are so short. And each year, even if I look on App Store games, every year the session time on average is reducing by 1 minute. The best games out there are barely manage to scrap a player's attention for 8 to 9 minutes. It's very, very difficult because if I go on my phone, I'm getting notifications, LinkedIn messages, someone trying to tell me payments again. It's like so many different things are trying to constantly take your attention away. And so we really need to make sure that in those few minutes, the player is getting as much fun and engagement as possible there, because that's all the only few minutes we have. And then making sure, kind of like when TV shows used to do it, like that, oh, this is what's going to happen, and put a cliffhanger at the end, and making sure that that's engaging enough for the player to want to come again.
I guess that makes that customer education thing even quicker then, and have to make it even more efficient when you're doing different games like that. I mean, what's your perspective on it, Kristjan?
No, indeed. We actually are working on a product internally that main KPI is to extend the session, essentially to be as unobtrusive as possible, to retain the players as much as possible, because the sessions are going down. But having like a very simple unobtrusive bonus mechanism, like that triggers randomly for the players throughout the players gaming session, where we assign them like a bonus, I think it helps, and it will help retain or extend the session, which after all, I think most of the players, that's what they're after. They want like 20 minutes completely out of this world, just like us watching a movie. And that's, I think, where we need to put the focus on.
Jason?
I think we are a very fast-paced industry, right? So when it comes to stuff like this, it's going to be very challenging because, especially when, we always try to be agile, right? And try to deliver the best product we can. For example, I've seen during the years, obviously, the industry started to adapt teams a lot, So for example, because you have a little time window when you have to release a product, reskinning certain products as well to make them more efficient and kind of deliver kind of the product in time for whatever is happening. Definitely, I agree with my colleagues here when it comes to users, the time is getting limited, especially, with their social lives and engagement, and, they just sit down and perhaps they want to, get away a bit, The time is limited on their side, so imagine on our side, right, when it comes to creating these products. So I definitely think from a provider side, we need to strike a good balance in order to deliver a good experience to them while we have that minimal time window.
What about you, Chris? What would you say your window for innovation is?
No, I pretty much what they mentioned again. We were talking about the session time, how long a player has to play. Now, put yourself in the player's shoes. Do you want to spend the entire session spinning your balance and you win absolutely nothing when you're online while you're in toilet break, on the bus, waiting for a train, whatever the case may be? Now, on top of that, are the session times getting shorter because volatility is going up? Are the session times getting shorter because players got more to do? It's all things that need to be taken into consideration. So, right. What was the question again?
Just how long are you willing to give something a go? Okay, right.
That's an interesting question. Coming from an operator's perspective, especially, it really comes down to how nice are you to casino manager? Because at the end of the day, he's going to be the person pushing the games, right? As one thing, a lot of providers don't tend to take in consideration. They don't have the actual initial report that they have. Then after that, it comes down to what are the graphics like? Because the first thing the players are going to click on is how nice that little picture looks that opens the game. Once you get past that point, then the player can actually get to experience the game. So then that's when how good is the game and the game features start to matter, right? So realistically, it's not just the one quick thing. It's a multiple thing. Now, from an operator perspective, it's quite easy. Is the game making us money? Yes or no? If no, then unfortunately, there's thousands more games out there. So why should I carry on pushing this one if it's not working?
So just one more question, and I guess this comes back to you, Kristjan, a bit more. Sort of community games are on the rise, and it sounds like the community is actually how VR might work if people are in there at the same time. I mean, is the human connection the simple way of making something more fun and immersive?
Definitely. I think the human connection is very, very important. Some of the players definitely are seeking that. We do have a product live spins where we have streamers and they interact with the players. It's a super fun experience. It's a completely different experience from the tradition where you are like over there by yourself. Now you have a community, you're betting together. It's almost like a virtual casino, like supporting each other. And I think that plays an integral part in the overall experience that some players might want. And we've seen data supporting that numbers increase, obviously, and also the actual games that are streamed increase in popularity as well. So definitely big plus from there.
Matthias?
So, I mean, we're inherently very social creatures, right? Like, if I'm walking in a group with a group of my friends and I separate from them, I start getting anxiety because where are my friends? My brain starts approaching alarm bells. So we're very inherently social. I mean, if we look at land-based casino, even if you go completely alone, there is so much social interaction you have, even just by seeing people around you. When I'm looking at mobile and desktop, it's very lonely. You're playing on your own. And I think that can deter some players because they don't want to play alone. So even just adding small things sometimes of making the player feel like they're not playing alone, just like advertising someone's wins, it makes people, okay, I'm not completely alone website. So I think it's that part. And then when it comes to the community games, for the segment of players that want to play interactively, definitely, right? I mean, even if we look at simple things like just crash games and even Spribe or crash games, just my ability to see how other people are doing makes me feel not alone. It doesn't have to, community engagement doesn't have to be where I am seeing someone or I'm playing with someone directly. It's more about how can I interact with others where I don't feel like I'm doing a lonely environment experience.
Definitely couldn't agree more than that. I mean, like when it comes to community, if we look obviously pre-pandemic, there was virtual way of interacting online, and after obviously engagement helped. Like even when it comes to fantasy sports, you have a big rise on that because obviously of the community engagement, that sense of when it comes to collaborating or playing actually with your friends and stuff like that. Definitely there is potential as well when it comes to certain other industries as well. Like we've seen Nike, where you have gym buddies, you just go in and train and so forth. So having that social interaction with this particular product is definitely key. You mentioned as well, like showing winnings of other players, like it gives you a sense that, you're playing with someone as well. I think as human beings, that sense of, connecting with other people has to kind of always stay there with us, and perhaps we need to embrace and kind of facilitate it more into our products.
Rather than answering the question, I think I will heed the warning because we are rapidly advancing towards this community engagement. One thing we know, example, take a look at online bingo from the over 20 years ago now. The chat rooms needed to be moderated, right? Human creatures can be extremely cruel individuals at times. And there's a lot of vulnerable people playing online, right? So it comes down to might be put in a situation where if there is no monitoring of the rooms, it could lead to quite bad situations. So rather than answering the questions, I would say that it's a great way to go, but caution needs to be put in place and certain precautions need to be put in place to make sure that no extra harm is being done through this.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Barcelona, being held at the Fira Barcelona Montjuic on the 19th to the 21st of September. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network or check out the latest edition of the SBC Leaders magazine. Happy reading.